It was a rainy afternoon in the quiet town of Willow Creek, the kind of rain that softened the edges of everything, blurring the line between reality and memory. Emily Lancaster, known to everyone simply as Grandma Emily, had left the house just before noon. She said she was going to church, as she had every Sunday for decades. Emily was a fixture of the town, gentle, kind, but with a hint of something else. A secret, some whispered, though no one could say what. She wore the same lavender perfume every day, a scent that seemed to linger even after she'd gone. That day, the scent mingled with the dampness in the air as she disappeared into the woods bordering the town. No one saw her again. The search lasted weeks. The townspeople combed the woods, called the police, posted flyers. But Emily Lancaster was gone, vanished without a trace. Some said she'd wandered off and gotten lost. Others believed darker things, but no evidence ever surfaced. Years passed. The house fell silent. The old oak tree in the backyard grew taller, its roots twisting deep into the earth, as if holding secrets beneath its bark. And the family? They held on to hope, wrapped in memories and the fading scent of lavender. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The town's whispers slowly quieted, but the Lancaster family never stopped searching. Emily's daughter, Margaret, held tight to hope, visiting the old oak tree every day, tracing her fingers over the rough bark as if willing her mother back. But time was relentless, and even hope began to fray at the edges. Lucy, Margaret's youngest child, grew up hearing the story, the day her beloved Grandma Emily vanished. She never knew the woman, but the mystery of her disappearance was woven into every family gathering, every quiet moment in the old house. On the day of the family reunion, Lucy wandered the yard, the golden light of autumn filtering through the branches of the ancient oak. Her eyes caught something strange. Etched deep into the bark was a name, glowing faintly in the fading light. Emily Lancaster. Lucy's heart quickened. How could it be? That carving hadn't been there last year. It was fresh, yet somehow weathered, as if carved by hands both gentle and deliberate. She called her cousins, and soon the whole family gathered beneath the sprawling branches. The mood shifted from joy to unease. Questions hung in the air like the last leaves of fall. And then, at the base of the oak, Lucy noticed something else, a narrow wooden door, hidden beneath moss and twisting roots. It looked impossibly old, almost like a secret waiting to be discovered. No one spoke as Lucy knelt before the door, brushing away the damp moss with her sleeve. The wood beneath was solid but old, its edges rounded by time, its surface marked with strange symbols, faintly burned into the grain. Not letters exactly, but shapes that tugged at something primal, something ancient. Margaret stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. Your grandmother used to draw symbols like those when she thought no one was watching. Lucy looked up, startled. You never told me that. Margaret's eyes were distant, as if pulling memories from a fog. I thought they were doodles. I was a kid. I didn't think they meant anything. The family exchanged uncertain glances. It was Uncle Paul who finally broke the silence, clearing his throat. It's probably just some old cellar or root chamber. These trees are ancient. Might be some kind of natural hollow. But no one believed that, not really. Lucy reached for the small iron latch embedded in the roots. To her surprise, it moved easily. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a narrow staircase carved directly into the earth, descending into darkness. Cool air rushed out, dry, still, and strangely sweet, like the scent of lavender long faded. Margaret held Lucy's shoulder. We should call someone, authorities, maybe. No, Lucy said. This was left for us. Without waiting for permission, Lucy stepped inside. The staircase wound downward, the light from the surface fading behind them. The walls were smooth dirt, but every few feet, stones jutted out, etched with the same markings from the door. As they descended, those carvings began to glow softly, casting a warm golden hue over the narrow path. By the time they reached the bottom, the family stood in a small chamber. The ceiling was low and arched, held together by thick roots like wooden ribs. At the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested an object wrapped in a blue silk cloth. Next to it, an old photograph. Lucy stepped forward and lifted the picture. It was Emily Lancaster, smiling, youthful, standing in front of the oak tree. But what made the photo impossible was what stood beside her. A man no one recognized, cloaked in strange robes, holding a staff carved from the same wood as the oak. On the back of the photograph, a single line was scrawled in faded ink. "The tree remembers. The gate must stay closed." Lucy turned to the others, her voice shaking. This isn't just a hiding place. This is something else. She wasn't taken. She went somewhere. Uncle Paul moved to the pedestal and gently lifted the silk. Beneath it lay a small stone disc, warm to the touch, etched with spiraling patterns that shimmered faintly in the low light. Suddenly, a low hum began to fill the chamber. The carvings on the wall pulsed, as if responding to the presence of the stone. A hidden mechanism groaned somewhere deep below. Then silence, and from a far wall, another doorway opened. Lucy stared into the darkness beyond, heart racing, the picture of her grandmother still in her hand. "She left us a trail," Lucy whispered. "We just never knew where to look." The air changed the moment they stepped through the doorway. It wasn't just colder, it was older, filled with a silence that felt alive, like it was watching. The tunnel beyond was wider, carved from dark stone veined with faintly glowing roots. The light pulsed rhythmically, like the heartbeat of something ancient and sleeping. No one spoke. Even Uncle Paul, the skeptic, said nothing now. Margaret clutched the photo of her mother. Lucy carried the stone disc, which seemed to vibrate gently in her palm. As they walked, the air thickened, not with moisture, but with memory, as if the space itself remembered footsteps taken long ago. And then the tunnel opened. Before them spread a vast underground forest, twilight blue light filtering down from no visible source. Trees grew sideways and upside down from the ceiling, their leaves glowing faintly like fireflies in glass. A river ran through the center of the cavern, but its waters shimmered silver, not clear. They were not alone. Figures stood beneath the glowing trees, tall, robed, quiet. Their faces were hidden, but Lucy didn't feel fear. She felt recognition, as if somewhere, deep in her blood, she knew them. One stepped forward. Its voice was soft, layered with an echo that made it hard to tell if it was speaking aloud or directly into her mind. "You are of her blood, the gatekeeper's line. Why do you disturb the tree's rest?" Lucy took a step forward, holding the stone disc. "We didn't come to disturb. We came because of Emily Lancaster, my grandmother. She disappeared, and now we know she came here." The figure tilted its head. "She came. She chose. She stayed." Another figure spoke now, its voice more direct. "The gate was sealed to protect your world from ours, and ours from yours. She was the last. Until now." Margaret stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Is she alive?" A pause. Then, "Not as you know it, but not gone, not lost." The ground beneath them pulsed, and suddenly a tree in the center of the grove split open, its trunk peeling like ancient doors. Inside was a crystal suspended in glowing vines, and within the crystal, faint but unmistakable, was a silhouette, a woman, still, peaceful. Margaret fell to her knees. Lucy whispered, "Grandma." Margaret reached for the crystal, but one of the robed figures raised a hand, not in threat, but in warning. Her body is held between moments. Disturbing the vessel would unmake what she has become. Lucy stepped beside her mother, eyes fixed on the woman suspended in the glowing crystal. The silhouette was unmistakable. Even in the strange light, she could see Emily's profile, serene, peaceful, timeless. She turned to the figures. "Why is she in there? What happened to her?" The first figure stepped closer. From beneath its hood, faint light glimmered, not eyes, but something older, wiser. 50 years ago, your grandmother crossed into our realm. The tree opened to her because she bore the mark, the gatekeeper's bloodline. She chose to remain when the veil began to thin." Lucy frowned. "The veil, the boundary between what is and what was, between your world and ours. It weakens every few generations. Your grandmother stayed to anchor it, to prevent what sleeps beneath from waking. Uncle Paul finally spoke, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You're saying she's the guardian?" She became one. The tree accepted her. She carved her name not in bark, but in time. That is how you found her. Lucy looked down at the stone disc, still glowing in her palm. "Then why bring us here? Why now?" The figure bowed its head. "Because the tree is failing. Its roots fray. The crystal dims. Her strength wanes. A new guardian must choose." The words echoed in the chamber like distant thunder. Lucy felt the weight of generations press on her shoulders. Margaret stepped forward, shaking her head. "No." She gave her life. "That should be enough. You can't ask for more." But the figures did not ask. They simply waited. One spoke again. "It is not demanded, only offered. The gatekeeper's blood can open the path, but only willing feet may walk it." Silence filled the grove. The crystal pulsed once, then again. Slower this time. Dimmer. Margaret turned to her daughter. "Lucy, we can go home. We can seal this place. Let her rest." Lucy stared at her grandmother, then at the glowing trees, the silver river, the endless quiet. She felt it again, that pull, like she belonged here. "Mom, if I go, you won't lose me." Just like we never lost her. She became part of something bigger. Margaret's eyes brimmed with tears. Lucy stepped toward the pedestal. "What happens if I choose to stay?" "You will not die, but you will not return. You will sleep when needed, wake when called, and you will remember everything." Lucy looked one last time at her grandmother. Then she placed the disc on the pedestal. The crystal bloomed with light. The trees swayed though there was no wind. The river shimmered gold. Emily's eyes opened within the crystal, soft, kind, proud. She looked at Lucy and smiled. Then the light burst outward, gentle, warm, wrapping Lucy in it. When the glow faded, two things had changed. The crystal now held Lucy, and Emily Lancaster was gone. The path back was not the same. Margaret noticed it first. The roots didn't pulse as they had on the way in. The tunnel felt colder, stiller. The symbols on the walls had dimmed, and the hum beneath their feet was gone, like a song that had finally ended. Behind them, the door of light, the glowing gate they had passed through, quietly sealed shut. There was no ceremony, no final message, no fanfare, just silence. Margaret clutched the old photo of her mother, now warm in her hands. Lucy's fingerprints still smudged the corner. Uncle Paul walked beside her, eyes cast low, his usual doubt nowhere to be found. They didn't speak much as they climbed out through the tree's hidden staircase, up into the hollow beneath the old oak. When they emerged, the woods were quiet, too quiet. Margaret squinted at the sky. The light was wrong brighter, but lower. The shadows stretched differently. Uncle Paul checked his watch, then stopped short. "It's not working." They reached the car. His phone, too, was dead. Margaret's had no signal. They drove the winding country road in silence, passing familiar bends and turns. But something gnawed at Margaret's mind. Every house they passed looked newer. Freshly painted fences, mailboxes she didn't remember, an unfamiliar playground where an old hardware store used to be. When they reached the town center, the truth hit them full force. A different gas station, a new digital billboard, a bank that hadn't existed 2 weeks ago. Margaret stepped out of the car and asked the first passerby she saw, "Excuse me, what year is it?" The woman blinked at her, slightly confused. 2025 May. Margaret staggered back. They had entered the tree on May 6th, 1975. 50 years. Gone. Back at the family farm. When Margaret finally reached her family home, her hands trembling on the key, nothing was the same. New cars in the driveway. A young woman opened the door, startled to see them. Inside, the decor was different. Digital photos. New furniture. Margaret stammered. I used to live here. My name is Margaret Lancaster." The woman froze. "You mean, the one from the story?" "What story?" The woman stepped aside and grabbed something from a drawer. An old black and white newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, stored in a plastic sleeve. On it was a photo of a much younger Margaret, and Lucy. The headline read, "Family vanishes near Lancaster Farm. Daughter and aunt presumed missing since 1975. The woman whispered, "They searched for years. Your farm was sold in '85. Margaret collapsed into a chair, staring at the article. Her mother had vanished. Lucy had vanished. Now, she was the only one who came back. The first letter arrived 3 days after they returned. It was slid under the door of the motel room where Margaret and Uncle Paul were staying. No postage, no sender, just a worn envelope marked with a single name. Mom." Margaret opened it with shaking hands. The letter inside was written in Lucy's handwriting. She knew that curved L, the looping Y. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and something older, like the air beneath the oak tree. May 9th, 1987. Dear Mom, I hope this reaches you one day. If it does, it means the tree kept its promise, that even through time, we're never completely lost. I'm not trapped here. Please know that. I chose to stay because Grandma's work wasn't finished. She showed me things you wouldn't believe. There's more to our family than anyone ever told us. The Lancaster women, we've always been connected to the Vale. Time moves differently here. I've seen years pass above, while only days pass below. I've learned to send messages through roots, through echoes. I don't know how many will reach you, but I'll keep writing and watching. I love you, Lucy." They thought she was lost forever, until a letter arrived from beyond the veil. Don't miss part 2.